Using a full-size mixer with a physical control surface versus using your iPad or some kind of tablet or even your phone to mix live sound. I feel like I spent enough time using a control surface and enough time not using a control surface, and I kind of have an opinion about it. So this video is not going to be a tutorial, but more of a mindset of why you would want to use a physical control surface versus just mixing on your iPad. In 2019, I bought my first M32 full-size console and I was really happy with it until last year. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that last year I sold it. And that was not a company mixer. It was my own personal mixer that I had with me at home. So I used it for about 3.5 years, maybe close to 4 years. And then I decided to get rid of it. And instead I bought the same brain mixer, but without the control surface. I bought the M32C with a DL32 stage box. So here are some pros and cons for having a control surface versus not having a control surface. Let's start with the pros. First of all, you get to actually touch the faders and the knobs and the buttons, and you can mix without really looking, and you can feel the music as some people describe it. You have something under your fingers. You can kind of be more precise or move more things at the same time. Another pro is reliability, and that is a pro and a con at the same time. We'll get to that. But what I mean right here is that you don't have to worry about the control surface disconnecting from the mixer because it's literally built into one unit. With more expensive consoles, the brain of the mixer is a side and the control surface is something else, and you can restart the control surface without restarting the audio engine. That's not the case with the M32. It's just everything in one package. I should probably explain this. If you're coming from the analog world and you're still new to digital mixers, the brain of the mixer, it's basically a computer that does all the computations for the audio, and then you have a control surface. So your faders and knobs and buttons aren't actually passing audio signal through them. They are just controlling the brain of the mixer. So it's a control surface that is connected directly to the brain. And that is very reliable because it's a hardwired connection. There's nothing to interrupt that control. So no matter what happens, you can still reach your faders, pull them down if feedback happens. That gives you some peace of mind. Oh, I don't have to worry about getting disconnected from my mixer and not being able to control the show. And the third pro is just looking cool. As stupid as it sounds, people have a tendency to assume that you know what you're doing, or perhaps respect you more if they see a big piece of gear. The same goes for cameras. If someone has a really good video camera that is small versus rigging it up and making it big and huge, the one with the bigger camera will look more professional, right? So if you're using a big control surface, even if you're not really doing much with it, just because it's there, you look like you know what you're doing. Now let's move on to the cons. The first con is that you have a really big mixer that is heavy and looks impressive, but you can't carry it around on your own. If you have this big control surface, you need someone to carry it with you. If you want to transport it, you need some kind of pickup truck or van or something that fits this big of a console. You can't take it in your car. That was one of the biggest reasons that pushed me to sell my mixer, is because I literally couldn't take it anywhere on my own. If I had a small conference, youth conference, maybe church, family conference, and I needed to get my gear in the car and go there, I can't do that. And if you're watching this video, I assume that you're not someone that has 10 vans and pickup trucks in their garage. So the first con is big, heavy, can't move it alone. Second con, components go bad. Over time, even if you're taking care of your gear, faders will become slower, knobs will start slipping, maybe buttons will not press anymore. And the full-size control surface is more vulnerable than you think when it comes to environmental factors, weather, humidity. So you have to keep your gear in a very controlled environment to preserve it as long as possible before you have to fix it. And if faders and knobs go bad, you have to fix them. You have to replace them, because that's the whole point of having a control surface, right? When I sold my full-size M32 console, I took it to the shop and the guy did a quick surface test. If you hold the first 4 buttons, the home button and the 3 buttons below it, and then turn on the console, you will go into surface test mode and you can move all the faders and click all the buttons and turn all the knobs and see if something is slipping. So when he did that, some of my faders were being slower than they should be, and some of the knobs were slipping at certain points. So you turn it, the value changes, and then it stops changing while you're still turning and then it catches again. Buttons, I don't think buttons go bad as quickly as knobs and faders. And also the scribble strip, the color starts fading away after a certain time. So what I'm saying is that you will have a ongoing maintenance. You have to replace parts, pay for them, pay for the labor of the person that is replacing them. So that's the second con, maintenance. A bit earlier, I was talking about reliability as a pro and con at the same time, and this is what I was talking about, because yes, having a physical control surface that is hardwired to the brain of the mixer is very reliable, but components go bad fairly often. Third con, it has more to do with the psychology of people. It's weird, I know, but when people see knobs and faders and stuff that they can touch and move with their hands, they are tempted to do that, even if they shouldn't. And yes, I know that you can lock your console if you walk away, so that even if someone changed something, it won't actually change because it's locked. But in my own experience, having too many moving parts exposed to the people, it's not a good idea, because the person that can turn a knob will turn a knob. Also, people aren't really responsible with their drinks. They bring coffee or water or whatever, and there's a risk of spilling it on the mixer and ruining your console. So you're always concerned about protecting it. Now, if we move to the M32C, which doesn't have a control surface, it's just the brain, that's actually a pro. There's nothing to go bad. It doesn't have knobs. It just has one knob, literally a general purpose knob, and you don't have to use it. Maybe you only use it when you first set up your mixer, when you first buy it, and just put in the IP address or set it to a DHCP or whatever, but that's it. You don't really use that knob. So even if it goes bad, it doesn't matter. And you will not be worried about people touching your mixer because it will not be exposed. It will be in a rack somewhere or backstage or next to the stage. It's out of sight. It's not something that is attractive to approach. Nobody really will want to come and play with a one rack unit piece of gear that doesn't have anything flashy. Second pro is that it's really small and very light. I can lift it, take it with me, put it in my car, take it to some youth conference if I have to, put it in a corner on the ground somewhere, connect everything to it. It doesn't take any space. If I want to travel, I can take it with me, put it in the plane. And that's a really big pro if you're just one person doing live sound. You don't have a team with you. You don't always have someone to lift things with you. You don't have a van or a big car to put your gear into. And sometimes the places that you are going to have a sound system or they have something in place. But I find it better to always bring my own mixer because I know how to use it. I know how to get a good sound out of it. And I know what I can and cannot do with it. The third pro is controlling it remotely and having more features that way than the console would normally offer. Let me explain. There is a control app from Music Tribe, from the company that makes the mixer, but first of all, it's not available for Android. It's only iPad, and it kind of sucks. You can disagree with me in the comments all you want. That's my personal opinion. I really don't like that app. Then you have Mixing Station, which I really love from the bottom of my heart, and that single developer who is making Mixing Station, thank you so much. You literally are a blessing to the entire audio community. Mixing Station works on any device, Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iPhone, iPad OS, everything. And it doesn't only control the Midas Behringer mixers, it controls a lot of different brands of mixers. There's the free version and there's the paid version, but in the free version, you can do everything that you can do on the mixer and a little more. And in the paid version, you get a lot more flexibility in how the app is laid out and customization and making special buttons that do special things. And also creating macros. You can literally make a button that does many things at the same time, one after the other. Mixing Station is really amazing. I've done plenty of videos on Mixing Station on my channel. And you know what's more amazing? I can use it on my phone. Almost 2 years I've been using Mixing Station on my phone, and it's the most convenient thing ever, because you might not always have your iPad or tablet, but you always have your phone. So no matter where you are, if you are in the audience or on stage mixing monitors or go to some place, do something, you have always control of your mixer and it's in your pocket. No running around, going back and forth. Now, sure, with the full-size M32, you can also control it remotely, but it kind of defeats the purpose because if you're using a physical control surface, then why would you want to control it remotely? And if you're controlling it remotely, then why would you need to use a physical control surface? Now, of course, there are also cons to not having a control surface. First one is if you like to touch things with your hands, you can't feel it anymore. On the screen, it's a bit different, although you can still move many things on the screen at the same time, but you're not touching it. Second con is Wi-Fi reliability. If you are in a very crowded place with a lot of networks, you might have trouble with your connection to your mixer. And maybe in a very bad scenario, you will get disconnected from your mixer and not be able to control what's happening. And that is actually a quite stressful situation to be in. I went through that once or twice and it's really it drives your anxiety through the roof. But if you know what you're doing and you're setting proper gain staging and not having your speakers too loud and not pointing your microphones at the speakers, feedback is not very likely to happen. So I can rest assured from that situation that I don't have to keep my hand on the fader in case it feeds back. Right? I'm pretty relaxed on that. Now, this isn't as bad as you think because it can easily be solved by, first of all, not using the cheapest router that you can find on the market. Get something good. More expensive routers are a lot better and you have a much more stable connection with them. It's not as likely to get disconnected. And I'm not talking crazy expensive, like just maybe a little bit more expensive than your $20 router. And also, if the place is big and one router isn't enough to have strong coverage over the entire area, you can set up another router in the back of the room and connect it with an Ethernet cable to the first router. And now if the signal from the first router is kind of weak, you can switch to the other router that is closer to you. That's actually what I did in my church. And also you can have a computer that is hardwired to the router. And with that, you will not lose connection because it's literally hardwired. There's no interference in the air. So that's your safety plan. You can have a computer at front of house connected with an Ethernet cable directly to the router that is connected to the mixer. And so now, even if your mobile device or tablets does get disconnected, you're not really worried about it because you can just go to the computer and do whatever you want to do until you get connected again. And it really doesn't take that long to get connected again. And the third con is that your little brain mixer may not have all the I/O that you have on your big M32 console, because the big console has the 6 aux inputs and 6 aux outputs, 1/4 inch, and it also has 2 headphones output and a couple of XLR monitor outputs that are for the solo bus. So with the M32C, you're not getting these aux inputs and outputs. You're just getting whatever comes in the stage box, that is 32 XLR inputs and 16 XLR outputs. Now you can use an extra stage box and get inputs into these aux channels and use all of them. You can do that, but that's at an extra cost. Last month, I had an event for a church and the organization I work with was offering the gear. So we brought in the line arrays, subwoofers, all the monitors, speakers on the floor, and the mixer. It's the full-size M32 live mixer. And we were in a tent. I'll show you some pictures on the screen while I'm talking. It was in a outdoors tent that can take in about 500 or maybe 800 people if it's really packed. And we were using the DL32 stage box connected with an Ethernet cable from the console to the stage box. And here's where the first problem occurred. That roll of cable that they provided was unshielded. So the event was on Sunday morning, but we did rehearsal on Saturday after night. And during rehearsal, everything was good. And towards the end of the rehearsal, they were just repeating one song one last time. The stage box disconnected from the mixer. And then I was like, what's happening? Because I didn't realize that the cable was unshielded because it had the EtherCon connector to it. So you really have to check everything. So I opened it and I saw inside the cable itself is unshielded, even though it has this connector on it. Luckily, they had another cable that is shielded. So we got this one and terminated it with the proper connectors. But if I was using my small M32C with a stage box that is in one case connected by a cable that is shielded and very short, I think it would be more reliable because I can still send a long Ethernet cable and connect it to a router. That's not a problem because it will not affect my audio. My audio is on stage. So I kind of understand now the thought process behind the more expensive consoles where they have the audio engine, the brain of the mixer in the racks on stage, and then they have just a control surface to control the mixer. So the board itself is not the mixer. It's just controlling whatever is happening in the audio engine. Anyway, what I was getting to is that I did everything on my phone, all the major things. Although I did have the control surface in front of me, I didn't touch it. I did everything with mixing station, the input gains, the gate, the EQ, compression on all the channels, the monitor sends, the effects, everything with this. And I had the mixer full. I was using all the channels and all the buses. And then when I finished doing everything on my phone, I went behind the console and just moved faders. Even during the event, I still had my phone open with mixing station and I put it on the console. I'll show you a picture. It's really funny that I trust mixing station more than the actual board. And the reason for that is because in the first song, the bass player was singing a cappella with the other vocalists, and he needed a different level of his voice in that monitor that was going to be used by a female vocalist later. So I was just kind of changing levels in the monitors on my phone while I'm mixing the main front of house mix on the console at the same time, because I didn't want to go through layers and hit flip faders and go into this hands-on faders and get out of it. But guess what you can do on mixing station? If you have a bigger screen, obviously it's not as easy to do with the phone, but if you have a normal tablet, you can have your sends on top and your faders on the bottom and never leave the mix. So then I realized how much more convenient and how much quicker it is actually to use the control app as opposed to do everything on the physical control surface. You might think that moving faders and knobs and buttons is faster. It's really not. However, if that mixer had a good touch screen, I think that would be different, but it doesn't. So the phone is a lot more quicker and more efficient. And last week we went to a very far region, also offering sound to a church for a certain event. And because of logistic constraints, I couldn't really put the console in the middle of the room. I had to put it close to the stage. And I'm talking about the full-size M32 console because that's the organization's mixer, not mine. And so I had the full-size control surface and I still mixed on my phone. I went to the middle of the room and used my phone and did everything on it. So for me, it makes a lot more sense to use a very compact mixer that doesn't have a control surface and do everything on a tablet or on a phone. And if I really wanted to sometime in the future, I'm really missing the faders, although I probably won't. But if I do, I can just get something like an X-Touch controller and plug it into the mixer, or even better, connect it to mixing station, because with mixing station, you can have a lot more flexibility and you can literally put whatever you want on any fader or knob or button, any parameter you can imagine. And if you're on a budget, getting the brain of the mixer and a stage box and a control surface on top of it, if you really like to touch things, is still a lot cheaper than buying the full-size console. So these were my 2 cents on the topic. Let me know your opinions in the comments down below. If you think that $500 is kind of expensive to pay for a little control surface, you can literally use any MIDI controller that you have in conjunction with mixing station to control your mixer. So click on the video on screen right now to learn how to do that, and I'll see you there.